Hello, pre-calculus. This video is all about section 2.1 from the textbook. It's called the rectangular coordinate system, which basically means we're talking about the XY plane in the same way that you guys learned it from all your years of math up to this point. I'm just going to be highlighting quadrants, distance formula, showing how maybe a triangle can either be proven as right, like a right triangle, an isosceles triangle, a scalene triangle. We're going to be talking about what it means to be a perpendicular bisector and what perpendicular lines are, just reviewing that stuff. Midpoint formula, and yeah, so I'm just going to use a series of odd numbered assignments from the textbook. Your job is to read the section as well. All right, so make sure you guys are reading everything so that you don't miss like important pieces that maybe I didn't necessarily cover in this video. So I'm going to get to it by starting with number 3 from the textbook on page 88. Let's see here. All right, the instructions are plot the points, and then they give us 5 different points, and it says describe the set of all points of the form a comma a, where a is a real number. So 0, 0 is the first point. The next point is 1, 1. All right, and keep in mind that this is our x-axis and this is our y-axis, and that every single ordered pair that we're plotting here is of the form x comma y. So a lot of times it can be confusing because the rise over run kind of gets us used to the idea of y first, x second, because of the rise over run with the slope of a line. But it's reversed here. So like when they say negative, no. Well shoot, they're all the same here. Okay, so in this example, it's 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 3, 3, negative 1, negative 1. Interesting. And negative 2, negative 2. So these are the 5 points they ask us to plot, and it says describe the set of all points of the form AA, where A is a real number. Well, when you think about it, these points all kind of form this line here. They're saying describe the form A comma A, where the x is equal to the y. Really, that's what they're saying. Describe all the points in which the x coordinate equals the y coordinate. And there's a couple different ways to talk about this. All right? So, describe. I could say, here's one explanation. I could say AA represents all the points on the line, and then we could write the linear equation for this line right here, which ends up being y equals x. Makes sense. The x coordinate equals the y coordinate. That's the equation for the line in which all these points would pass through. You could also say something to the idea of this seems to be splitting up the first quadrant, right? I said I was going to talk about quadrants. You guys remember 1, 2, 3, 4 as the 4 different quadrants. Sorry, if you guys don't know Roman numerals, go back and study it. Watch the Rocky movie series. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you go counterclockwise, it'll tell you what coordinates they are. You could say this is bisecting, splitting it into 2 equal parts, both the first coordinate, the first quadrant, and the third quadrant. So that's a second way of explaining it. AA, the set of all points AA, bisects both quadrants 1 and 3. So those would both be acceptable answers for number 3. Let's talk about number 7 now. Number 7 gives us 6 different situations. Describe the set of all points x, y in a coordinate plane that satisfies the given conditions. So, 7a, we'll just start right here. X equals -2. Well, if we're talking about the xy plane, this is basically just saying every single point you plot has to have -2 for my x coordinate, and then y can be whatever you want it to be. So, left 2, y could be 0. Or y could be 1. Or y could be 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, or 7, or 100 million. Same thing in the negative direction. Yeah, so when you see this, it's like, oh, I've got a line like this. So when it says, describe the set of all points in a coordinate plane that satisfy that condition, what you could say is, x equals -2 is a it's a vertical line all right, and one of the key pieces of information that you'll start to see here is it has an x-intercept of -2, or we could say that passes through -2, 0. And, I mean, we could also say it's parallel to the y-axis. I mean, that's marginally interesting, so I'm going to put it on there too. X equals -2 is a vertical line that passes through -2, 0, and is parallel to the y-axis. So that's the kind of explanation. I think that's the kind of explanation that the textbook's looking for. So there's 7a. 7b is talking about y equals 5. Yeah, so again, I'm struggling here, as you can see. Keeping things not on the ground. Y equals 5. That just means that the y-axis, that coordinate, is always 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it could be, x can be whatever you want it to be. It can be 1, 5, 2, 5, 7, 5, -5, 5. It basically represents a horizontal line that passes through 0, 5. It's sort of like the y-intercept is kind of an important piece of info. And it's parallel to the x-axis. All right, so that's a very thorough description of all the points that satisfy that condition right there. All right, so 7c. This gives you an inequality, all right? X is greater than or equal to 0. So we're talking about all the ordered pairs where x could be 0, any y you can think of. Or it could be 0.7, any y you can think of. Or 72, like anything bigger than 0. So this would be a vertical line, that would be a vertical line, that would be a vertical line, but it's a series of infinite vertical lines. So how we do that is we say, this represents a vertical line, which is basically the y-axis, all right? X equals 0 is the y-axis. But we're talking about everything to the right of the y-axis. Every vertical line to the y-axis is really talking about every point to the right of the y-axis. So a good way to visualize that is just to think of it in terms of shading. Yeah, so any point that lives in this shaded region right here. So pretend like that's all shaded in. All of it's shaded. I just don't want to spend the whole video trying to make sure I fill every spot here. Okay, so all points right of the y-axis satisfy those conditions. So x is greater than or equal to -2 is the set of all points to the right of the y-axis. So I'm guessing 7D will be something similar, but just, oh no, it's a little bit different. (7D) is asking for something very, very different. It's saying, hey, xy is greater than 0. Okay. So when you think about that, it's sort of like saying, take the x-coordinate and multiply it by the y-coordinate. What kind of products, the result of multiplication, what kind of products would yield a number that's bigger than 0? Well, a positive times a positive is bigger than 0. And a negative times a negative is bigger than 0. So where is the x-coordinate positive and the y-coordinate positive? Quad 1. And where is the x-coordinate negative and the y-coordinate negative? Quadrant 3. I'll just use numbers. So, can we say all the points in quadrant 1 and all the points in quadrant 3? I think so. xy is greater than 0. Is the set of all points in quadrants 1 and 3. So you see what the textbook writer's doing. They're really just making you think about different scenarios in which to describe points and not just say, can I plot things and can I graph equations? It's really kind of getting at the fundamentals of things. All right, 7E says, what's going on when y is less than 0? Well, remember, y's are horizontal lines. 0 would be the x-axis. And if it's y is less than 0, we should say everybody below this. Every point below the x-axis is going to satisfy that conclusion right there. So y is less than 0 is the set of all points below the x-axis. And you know what? I just remembered. I think I need to make a slight adjustment now to 7C. Because 7C had an equal to, right? 7C had x is greater than or equal to 0, I should have said including the y-axis. Everything to the right of the y-axis and including the y-axis. So go back in your notes and make that adjustment. This would not include the x-axis because it has a less than symbol and not an equal to. And I'll say right here, not including the x-axis. Although it's kind of implied when I say below, I'm saying don't include it. All right, one more and then I'll start a new video on this stuff. So 7EF. There we go. All right, then 7F basically says, what are you talking about with x equals 0? And that's just, we just talked about it. This is the y-axis. That's what x equals 0 represents. X equals 0 represents all points on the y-axis. All right, so hopefully this video is helpful for at least clarifying number 3 and number 7. In the next video, I'm going to try to roll through 11, 15, 17. We'll see how long that takes.